Obviously, this emotion and passion surrounding this issue is not new, but I think it's important to underline the fact why we are so frustrated and upset in the San Joaquin Valley, probably the richest agricultural region in the entire country, maybe the world, and that is our water sustainability, our water reliability is uncertain. And I don't disagree with Congressman Garamendi that these sacrifices are going to have to be shared across the board, and the entire state needs to come together. The frustration from our constituents is we're the only ones that have had to give. We've given over 1 million acre-feet of water with regards to the CVPIA reform. We've given over 200,000 acre-feet of water with regards to the San Joaquin River restoration effort. I'd like to know where the folks in the Upper Sacramento River Basin are giving their share, where the people in the Delta are giving their share, where the people in the Bay Area are sacrificing from their water supply in Hetch Hetchy, are the people in Southern California. The fact of the matter is the Central Valley has been a target with a bullseye on it in which they say, aha, these folks are farmers, they're isolated, they're small in numbers, we can take the water from them. That's the bottom line. Now let me get on to some questions here that I think are important. Mr. Beck, in your view, in the language in this bill, is it sufficient so as not to shift a double burden into the state water project contractors like Kern County, our Metropolitan Water District, with regards to the Endangered Species Act?
Yes, I believe it will not shift those burdens.
Mr. Birmingham, you've indicated that, in fact, a commitment to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. It's a voluntary effort to develop an overall habitat plan so that the state and federal operators can work together to not look at one species at a time, but for, in fact, us to look at the comprehensive effect using the best science, which the judge has indicated repeatedly has not been used, which the Bureau of Reclamation in listening to the river indicated has not been used. Do you think this will destroy the elements of the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, and tell me why or why not?
No, Mr. Costa, it will not destroy our efforts to develop a Bay Delta Conservation Plan. The legislation actually contains language that contemplates that there can be an agreement of the parties to the Bay Delta Accord that would result in new restrictions under the Endangered Species Act. But your point, a couple of things in response to your point. The first is, as you said in your opening remarks, this legislation isn't perfect. There are revisions to this legislation that could very easily be made, and my understanding is that the authors of the legislation have a similar view. If there are changes that need to be made, then let's change the legislation to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences. But the other point is that a habitat conservation plan really is a voluntary program. The BDCP is an HCP under Section 10 of the Endangered Species Act. It's voluntary, and there's nothing in this legislation that would prevent the contractors from entering into that voluntary program in order to proceed with projects to restore water supply.
Quickly, before my time has expired, 108 requires the principles set forth in the 1994 Bay Delta Accord be the basis for the new biological opinion. We have had a lot of discussion on the biological opinions, and the flows can't be more restrictive than those in the Accord. Why should we go back to 1994?
Well, I don't think we are going back to 1994. What the legislation says is the biological opinions cannot impose restrictions, but the assertions that we're going back to 1994 ignore all of the other authorities that the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of the Army, EPA have to further environmental restoration in the Delta, and this legislation does nothing to affect those other authorities.
And it's your view that Fish and Wildlife Services and National Marine Fisheries can use the best available science as required under ESA in developing new, reasonable, and prudent alternatives?
Yes.
The flow requirement. Is it your read on that, Mr. Connor, that is possible under this legislation were it to become law?
I'm sorry, that what is possible?
Whether or not it's still possible for Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries to use the best available science under ESA on the RPAs?
Well, I think the position is that the Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service are using the best available science in the current biological opinion.
Well, I would argue with that. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be going back to reconsulting on the smelt biological opinion, and I suspect that may be a part of the issue with the salmon biological opinion when the judge rules, hopefully in the next month.
You are correct on that point, that there have been questions raised in the litigation. The judge has found that there are aspects of the biological opinion that need to go back and be revisited. That is correct. But fundamentally, I think the view is that they, as I mentioned earlier, the foundation of the biological opinions have been upheld as the best available science.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Tipton.